Hello students, welcome to your second session of chapter number 17 of your first PUC NCERT, that is breathing and exchange of gases. In last class, we did discuss regarding the different methods of respiration in case of smaller organisms, invertebrates, as well as we had a detailed study regarding human respiratory system. We did come to know different types of organs which are involved to form this respiratory system, as well as their function. Along with which we did also discuss different types of respiratory volumes and respiratory capacities. In today's class, we will be learning about the second half of this chapter, that is exchange of gases. When it comes to exchange of gases, here we have to be very much specific what kind of gases will be exchanged. The kind of gases which are going to be exchanged will be carbon dioxide as well as oxygen. So, carbon dioxide and oxygen gets exchanged between the atmosphere as well as our respiratory system. That is why it is termed intrapulmonary exchange. So, here in human respiratory system, there is a bag-like or sac-like structure which is attached to the bronchioles, which are called alveoli. This alveoli helps in exchange of gases. Now, when it comes to exchange of gases, here we have to study about pressure gradient. So, if there should be an exchange of gases within the alveoli, there should be a pressure difference, which is called pressure gradient. How air develops a pressure anta kelidre, it is due to, now if you consider atmospheric air. Atmospheric air contains mixture of gases like carbon dioxide, oxygen, nitrogen, etc. When each of them contribute their pressure and increase the atmospheric pressure. Atmospheric pressure ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಒಂದೊಂದು ಇಂಡಿವಿಜುವಲ್ ಗ್ಯಾಸಸ್ನ ಪ್ರೆಷರನ್ನು ಕನ್ಸಿಡರ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ಇಂಡಿವಿಜುವಲ್ ಗ್ಯಾಸಸ್ ಅಪ್ಲೈ ಪ್ರೆಷರ್ so that it develops a atmospheric pressure. As individual gases develop a pressure, this pressure is termed partial pressure. And this partial for carbon dioxide will be represented like this. For oxygen will be represented like this. As we are concentrating more on only two of the gases, let me say that the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is represented this way and that of oxygen is represented the other way. So, here a partial pressure means it is contribution of individual gases to the atmosphere is termed the partial pressure. Now, we will study about how there is exchange of gases taking place. First, we should know within the alveoli how there will be exchange of gases. For that purpose, we have to draw the diagram of the alveoli. So this is the diagram representing the alveoli where the exchange of gases takes place. Now when it comes to this diagram, this bulb-like structure is termed the alveoli sac or alveoli, where there will be exchange of gases. I told you that for exchange of gases, it is necessary that partial pressure of carbon dioxide and oxygen will be having a pressure gradient. Now when it comes to the alveoli, a gas, when it should get exchanged in the alveoli, it should pass through 3 different layers. So once the atmospheric air enters into the alveoli, it will be exchanged between the capillaries or the blood or the cells. For this purpose, the air should travel into 3 main layers. One is the squamous layer of the alveoli. So it is the squamous epithelial layer of the alveoli, which is a single layered cell structure. Next comes the pulmonary capillaries or the blood capillaries, which is having endothelial layer. Here also it is a single layer. Endothelial layer of pulmonary capillaries are there, which contains large amount of RBC cells. In between both the alveoli and pulmonary capillaries, they have a space which is termed basement membrane. So a gas, when it should get exchanged within the body for intrapulmonary respiration, it should pass 3 different layers. One is the squamous epithelial layer of the alveoli, then comes the basement membrane, and then the endothelial layers of the pulmonary capillaries. Once the air passes between these 3 layers, then you can consider that the gas has been exchanged between the cells as well as the alveoli. It's a give and take policy where the oxygen from the atmosphere will be taken into the body and carbon dioxide, which are released in excess amount by the cell, will be given out into the atmosphere. This process takes place within the alveoli. So this is a diagrammatic representation of alveoli layers and pulmonary capillaries. Next we have to study about different types of pressures which are involved in exchange of gases. So what kind of pressure helps in exchange of gases? This is a chart which represents the partial pressure of oxygen as well as carbon dioxide. Why I am considering only these 2 gases? Because these 2 are the only one which plays major role in the respiration of human beings. So these 2 gases have pressures which are present in different forms in different parts of the respiratory system along with atmosphere. So when it comes to the respiratory gas oxygen and respiratory gas carbon dioxide, oxygen partial pressure in the atmosphere will be 159, whereas carbon dioxide partial pressure in the atmosphere will be 0.3%. Now when it comes to alveoli, the contribution or the partial pressure of oxygen will be 104, that of carbon dioxide will be 40. Exchange of gases in any part of your body or between the respiratory system and the atmosphere takes place by a process of diffusion. So what is diffusion? Movement of molecules from higher concentration to lower concentration is termed diffusion process. So when it comes to diffusion process, here atmospheric oxygen will be 159 compared to alveoli. The diffusion process takes place here, movement of molecules from higher concentration region to the region of lower concentration. And next one, carbon dioxide. Here if you see for diffusion, the concentration of carbon dioxide is more in the alveoli compared to the atmosphere. That is why the contribution of carbon dioxide is in a reverse diffusion, that is from the alveoli into the atmosphere takes place. So that is how there will be exchange of gases between the atmosphere and the alveoli. So atmospheric pressure will be 159 and alveoli pressure will be 104. What happens? The movement of oxygen molecules from the atmosphere to the alveoli takes place and carbon dioxide from the alveoli moves into the atmosphere because the concentration of carbon dioxide is more in the alveoli. Next, once the alveoli is having enough amount of oxygen and lesser amount of carbon dioxide, what should happen is they come across the pulmonary capillaries, that will be the blood. So blood RBC cells are the one which takes up the oxygen in exchange of carbon dioxide. So the blood cells which have higher amount of carbon dioxide and lesser amount of oxygen are termed deoxygenated blood, whereas blood which contains rich or large amount of oxygen and lesser amount of carbon dioxide, those are called oxygenated blood. Now the alveoli has come across the blood capillaries which is deoxygenated and the carbon dioxide ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಇದ್ದು oxygen ಕಮ್ಮಿ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. So what happens? Again the diffusion process takes place. So if you consider here 104 will be the pressure of oxygen in the alveoli compared to the deoxygenated blood. So the diffusion from the alveoli takes place into the deoxygenated blood, and when it comes to the carbon dioxide, the concentration of carbon dioxide in the deoxygenated blood is more compared to the alveoli. So carbon dioxide from the deoxygenated blood passes on into the alveoli. Next, when this deoxygenated blood has completely become oxygenated, the concentration of oxygen will be 95 in oxygenated blood and 40 will be for carbon dioxide. Next, when this oxygenated blood comes in contact with the tissue, what happens is the concentration of oxygen in the oxygenated blood is more compared to the tissues. So the oxygenated blood will contribute the oxygen into the tissue for metabolic process in case of tissue. Whereas if you see the carbon dioxide concentration in the tissue, carbon dioxide will be more compared to the oxygenated blood. That is why the contribution of tissue carbon dioxide will be more to the blood. So that is how there will be exchange of gases between the atmosphere until the tissues. So whenever the concentration is more, that moves to an area of a lower concentration which is termed diffusion. So this is how there will be exchange of gases. So once again we will revise this. Respiratory gases are of two different types which helps in respiration. It will be oxygen and carbon dioxide. The partial pressure or pressure gradient helps in the exchange of gases through a process called diffusion, where the molecules from higher concentration moves towards the lower concentration. When it comes to oxygen, the atmospheric pressure of oxygen will be 159 and carbon dioxide will be 0.3. But when it comes across the alveoli, the partial pressure of oxygen will be 104 and that of carbon dioxide will be 40. So the oxygen molecules from the atmosphere get exchanged with the alveoli and carbon dioxide from the alveoli moves into the atmosphere. Once the alveoli is having ample number of oxygen, it should get exchanged with the pulmonary capillaries which carries the deoxygenated blood. What is a deoxygenated blood? A deoxygenated blood is the one which have larger amount of carbon dioxide and lesser amount of oxygen, whereas when it comes to oxygenated blood, it should carry large amount of oxygen and less amount of carbon dioxide. So, when this alveoli carrying higher amount of oxygen comes across the deoxygenated blood carrying lesser amount of oxygen, the contribution of oxygen from the alveoli to the deoxygenated blood will be seen and the contribution of carbon dioxide from the deoxygenated blood into the alveoli can also be observed. Next, when this deoxygenated blood gets converted into oxygenated, the amount or the pressure of oxygen will be 95 and that of carbon dioxide will be 40. As blood is a fluid connective tissue, it flows all over the body so that the tissues get enough amount of oxygen for their normal metabolic process. Here also, when the oxygenated blood comes across the tissue will be having lesser amount of oxygen because the produced amount of oxygen will be utilized for their metabolic activity. So, the pressure will be 95 for oxygen and that for carbon dioxide will be 40. So, 95% ಇರೋದ್ರಿಂದ oxygen blood ಇಂದ that too oxygenated blood ಇಂದ tissue ಗೆ diffuse ಆಗಿಬಿಡುತ್ತೆ. ಟಿಶ್ಯೂ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕಾರ್ಬನ್ ಡೈಆಕ್ಸೈಡ್ ಸಂಖ್ಯೆ ಹೆಚ್ಚಿರೋದ್ರಿಂದ tissue will be contributing the carbon dioxide back into the oxygenated blood. ಈ exchange ಆದ ನಂತರ the oxygenated blood will automatically become deoxygenated blood and the whole process continues in the same way. This is how there will be exchange of gases. This can also be studied with the diagrammatic representation, which is This is the diagrammatic representation of the chart what we have discussed earlier. So this is the alveoli where there will be inspiration as well as expiration process taking place, that is breathing in and breathing out. For this purpose there will be exchange of gases between the body cells as well as the alveoli and the atmosphere. Due to higher atmospheric pressure, inspiration takes place, and due to higher partial pressure of oxygen, oxygen gets transferred into the alveoli, and from the alveoli carbon dioxide will be expired out. So once there is oxygen pressure more in the alveoli, that will be 104 mm of Hg, and carbon dioxide will be 40 mm of Hg, which gets exchanged between the pulmonary vein. From the alveoli there will be exchange of gases between the artery. Now the artery carries the deoxygenated blood towards the lungs and veins carries the oxygenated blood. Artery gets the deoxygenated blood towards the alveoli. Again there is a pressure difference which helps in contribution of alveoli oxygen into the lungs, and from the lungs the contribution of carbon dioxide into the alveoli takes place. Once there is exchange of oxygen, the blood from deoxygenated gets converted into oxygenated, which is carried through the pulmonary vein into the heart. Which part of the heart? The left side of the heart. Left part of your heart carries oxygenated blood and right part carries the deoxygenated blood. Here I have mentioned the oxygenated blood by shading the part where it is carried, and non-shaded will be carrying the deoxygenated blood. So once it is contributed into the pulmonary veins, through the systematic arteries they are carried into the tissues, which now carries the oxygenated blood. The oxygenated blood will be having oxygen partial pressure 95 and carbon dioxide 40. Whereas in the tissue, due to metabolic activities, the oxygen partial pressure will be 40 and the carbon dioxide will be 45. So due to diffusion process, oxygen from the arteries get transferred into the tissue and carbon dioxide from the tissues moves into the blood. Now the oxygenated blood has converted itself into deoxygenated blood. This deoxygenated blood is carried through systematic veins into the right side of the artery, which again through pulmonary arteries are going back near to the lungs for exchange of gases. This is a cyclic process which keeps on taking places, so that there is a proper respiration and each and every tissue is supplied with enough number of oxygen. So this is how there is exchange of gases taking place in our body. Next we will have to study about transport of gases, where we will be studying transport of oxygen and transport of carbon dioxide in detail. So in transport of gases, we will start with transport of oxygen. So within the body, the transport of oxygen takes place by two ways, that is about 97% by the RBC cells and about 3% by plasma in the dissolved form. So 97% will be taken up by the RBCs, and when it comes to 3%, that will be carried in the plasma in dissolved form. Now how do this RBC take up the oxygen anta keladre? RBC contains a pigment which is called hemoglobin. This hemoglobin or the RBC cell contains iron molecules. So each RBC cell can trap almost about 4 oxygen molecules. RBCs carry about 97% of oxygen present in the blood, and that is due to presence of a hemoglobin pigment. This pigment also gives red color to the RBC cells, and each RBC cell have the ability of carrying about 4 oxygen molecules. When the oxygen combines with the hemoglobin, they help in formation of oxyhemoglobin. This oxyhemoglobin combination is taking place when the RBC can hold about 4 molecules of oxygen. That process is called association, and when it comes towards the tissue there will be dissociation. So, this dissociation and association are dependent on 4 different factors. Those 4 different factors will be partial pressure of oxygen, partial pressure of carbon dioxide, hydrogen ion concentration and the temperature. So, 4 factors contribute in the association or dissociation. Association anta helidre oxygen combining with the RBCs to form oxyhemoglobin. Dissociation anta helidre oxygen separating from the RBCs and getting transferred or diffused into the tissues. So, 4 factors will be partial pressure of oxygen, partial pressure of carbon dioxide, hydrogen as well as the temperature, that is concentration of hydrogen and temperature. When the partial pressure of oxygen is high, carbon dioxide is less, hydrogen concentration is less and the temperature is lower. All this contributes in association. Whereas, when the partial pressure of oxygen is less, carbon dioxide is more, hydrogen concentration is still much and the temperature is high, it leads to dissociation. So, partial pressure oxygen ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಇದ್ದು carbon dioxide, hydrogen ions and temperature ಇದು ಮೂರು ಕೂಡ ಕಮ್ಮಿ ಇತ್ತು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ it leads to joining, that is formation of oxyhemoglobin, or you can also call it association. Whenever there is reduction in the partial pressure of oxygen, more in carbon dioxide, higher hydrogen ion concentration and more will be the temperature, then what will happen? It leads to the separation or dissociation. Association takes place in the alveoli and dissociation takes place near the tissues. So, this is how 4 factors are responsible for association and dissociation process in the transport of oxygen. This association or dissociation process can be represented in a graph where the oxygen graph gives a sigmoid curve. So, that will be So, in this graph you can see that the oxygen association or dissociation curve have given a sigmoid curve. This one representing the sigmoid curve. So, when you plot a graph against the partial pressure of oxygen against percentage of saturation of hemoglobin with the oxygen, it gives this type of sigmoid curve or S-shaped curve. As there is higher the partial pressure, the association also increases. Reduction in the partial pressure of oxygen, the association decreases and leads to dissociation. This curve is called the oxygen dissociation curve, which represents the association of oxygen with the hemoglobin to form oxyhemoglobin, and reduction in the partial pressure of oxygen leads to the dissociation of the oxygen from the hemoglobin. 100 ml of blood almost delivers about 5 ml of oxygen. In 100 ml of blood, 5 ml of oxygen can be combined to form oxyhemoglobin. So, that is about transport of oxygen which takes place in our body. So, in next class we will be studying about transport in carbon dioxide, regulation of the respiratory system as well as few of the disorders. So, in today's class we did discuss regarding the exchange of gases, about partial pressure of carbon dioxide and oxygen in different parts of our respiratory system along with the atmosphere, and also how the exchange takes place through the diffusion process, along with which we have also started with transport of gases and we have covered transport of oxygen. That is all in today's session. Thank you.